right. Well, another one of these times where Dan McClellan is just showing you his own cards. A scholar is someone that's going to objectively view the text and try to give you a real understanding of what the text says. And if it's ambiguous or there's room for other interpretations, a scholar is going to do his best to try to vet those interpretations. Dan doesn't do that. And what he's about to say about Luke 21 is so ridiculous, but let's run through it.
The story of Jesus' birth, as found in Luke 1 and 2, is not historical.
So his claim is it is not historical. So now he has to have enough data to prove that he can conclusively state that Luke 21 is not, the birth narrative in Luke 2 is not historical. So let's hear what his evidence is.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. According to Luke 1, Jesus would have had to have been born, if not during the life of Herod, within about a year of his death at the latest. So Jesus would have had to have been born by 3 BCE, if Luke chapter 1 is historical. But chapter 2 introduces two critical problems. The first is that the author needs to get Joseph and Mary from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, so Jesus could be born there in fulfillment of prophecy.
Now, he's assuming that Joseph is just doing this to fulfill. This is God moving Joseph to do this, right? I don't think Joseph understands, oh, Jesus has to be born in Bethlehem. It's part of, the prophecy. Because I don't think that's what's happening here. That's at least not the reason that the text gives that they're going to Bethlehem. It doesn't say so that they could fulfill prophecy, right? Dan is trying to make it seem like this is all just a fraud, that they're just doing this on purpose to make it seem like they're fulfilling prophecy. That's not even what the story says. So he's already going out to left field. He's already bringing into his interpretation his own Mormon biases. That's the problem with Dan McClellan, is he's not being honest with you. But let's continue.
And the method they choose to accomplish that is to say they needed to go back to their ancestral hometown in order to register for this tax. Here's the first big problem. Rome conducted a lot of censuses. They absolutely never required people travel to their ancestral hometown.
Nothing in Luke 21 says that Caesar Augustus required anybody to go to their hometown. Doesn't say that. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. That's the only thing that Caesar Augustus put forward. He never said anybody needed to go to their hometown. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town, not his ancestral, where he lived. If he was traveling, he would go home so he could be registered in where his residence was, where his home was. That's the point of a census, to determine how many people are living in their hometown. It doesn't say ancestral hometown. There are actually Greek words that could have been used to say ancestral hometown. It then says that Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was the house and lineage of David. So it was extremely important to go to Bethlehem because his whole family, his whole lineage is from the house of David, which would have been very important to them. Underlying reasoning that Joseph is going to Bethlehem is because God is moving them to fulfill biblical prophecy, for sure. But there's nothing in here that says that Caesar Augustus is requiring this. It says, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. It doesn't say ancestral hometown. It just says his own town, which means the town he lives in. Joseph decides to go to Bethlehem. Why? Because God is moving them to fulfill prophecy that they don't even know about. So this is not conclusive evidence that Luke 2 is not historical. You could say you believe it's not historical, but there's absolutely no way to make this claim that Luke 2 is not historical. Garbage, dude. There's no evidence here to say that there's anything wrong with this narrative.
To register. They registered in the towns where they lived and worked.
And that's what it says that they went and did. They went to their own town. That's what it says.
Only because it would not be feasible for the majority of people to travel to their ancestral hometowns, but it would entirely nuke the economy.
Nowhere in Luke 21 does it say that Caesar Augustus told everybody to go to their ancestral hometown. This is a make-believe. This is a make-believe argument. Where does it say that? In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. It's a census. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered in his hometown. That's what would have happened. That's what happens at a census. You go home. If you're traveling somewhere, you go home. Joseph decides to go to Bethlehem because his home essentially is in Bethlehem. He's in the line of the king. I would have gone to Bethlehem too. I'm not registering in Galilee. No thanks. I'm going to Bethlehem to register. I don't want people to know my hometown's in Nazareth. Are you kidding me? No thanks. So this is just not scholarship. This is Dan McClellan showing his hand that he's not a scholar. He doesn't critically look at anything. He's just a Mormon with a vendetta, honestly. And on top of all that, there's a way to say ancestral home in the Greek. We can have the Greek scholars correct me if I'm wrong. There's a way to say ancestral home or home of our fathers in Greek, and that's not what this says. It says hometown. So it's got nothing to do with ancestry. Joseph decides to do that to fulfill prophecy, and he's being led by the Lord to do it, obviously, based on what the text says. So this is just, again, this is not scholarly work. This is a biased hater of God who wants you to believe that the Bible's been corrupted. This is not conclusive. Even if Dan wanted to continue to believe this, this is not sufficient evidence to say that Luke 2 is not historical, period.